Well, I reckon y'all are wondering what happened to me. My whole life, I'd been the last one in the bowl. Heck, most folks don't even think twice about a breadstick.
Chex Quest was an advert game released in 1996 by the multimedia advertising company Digital Cafe. It was distributed by General Mills in boxes of Chex cereal. During a time when most cereal box prizes were plastic whistles and shit, Chex Quest stood apart from the others by being a fully fleshed out video game. This was unprecedented at the time, and to some degree, General Mills knew this. Over 5 million Chex Quest CDs were shipped in boxes of Chex that year, and General Mills saw Chex sales increase over 295% from the previous year. Furthermore, development of the game wasn't exactly expensive. General Mills allocated about $500,000 for the whole budget: art, music, sound, programming, and advertising. Chex Quest was merely a skin of the Doom engine, with slight modifications to enemy and weapon behavior. id Software had just released Quake, and so they inexpensively licensed the engine to Digital Cafe. To id, the engine was an obsolete relic. A big selling point for Chex Quest was that it was non-violent too. The nasty, mucus, green cum monsters called the Phlegmoids aren't actually being killed. No, the Phlegmoids are actually being sent back to their home planet with your weapons, each a different kind of Zorcher. Even more kid-friendly was that your health in the game was your ability to move. As the Phlegmoids dunk you with loads of snot, a death is you being entombed and immobilized in mucus instead of dying, which is still kinda messed up. If you'll allow me to make one god-awful pun in this video, people loved Chex Quest, and they were hungry for more. Although we'd never see another cereal box distribution again, Digital Cafe released a sequel on their website in 1997. 11 years later, Charles Jacoby, the original lead artist from Digital Cafe that worked on Chex Quest, released a threequel called Chex Quest Episode 3 in 2008. Lastly, a complete reimagining of the original levels on the Unreal 4 engine, called Chex Quest HD, was released on Steam in May 2020. With the release of Chex Quest HD, the milk soap saga of Chex Quest officially spans 24 years. Why is it remembered and revered? Contemporary critics in the 90s actually received it quite negatively. Is it just nostalgia? Does Zorching Phlegmoids remind us of a time when that was all we had to care about? Are the second and third episodes worth revisiting in this day and age? Why the fuck did General Mills discontinue multi-brand Chex, my favorite flavor? All these will be answered as we dive into the shredded wheat saga of the Chex Quest Quadrilogy. Despite being released for free, I feel very comfortable calling Chex Quest HD a giant piece of shit that is devoid of any soul and charm from the original trilogy. From its garish, plasticky presentation to the bizarre atmosphere and voiced characters, the whole package feels more shreddies than Chex. The game starts out quite promising. Hey, look, a character selection screen. Chex has since evolved into Chex Mix, and we are given a cabal of crunchy comrades to choose from. I chose Shane, the weird puffy breadstick thing, because I really like those in Chex Mix. If only I knew.
Big old bowl of milk. Times like these, it pays to be a cowboy. Red, the color of biscuits or something. Even cowboys care about safety, especially cowboys. Well, they done made me stronger. Hot diggity, I like the sound of that. But I reckon the taste of adventure was just too sweet.
A fully voiced and animated introduction fills us in on the Chex Quest lore and sets us up for the game. Then Shane speaks and it all comes undone immediately.
They don't call me Shane the Dread McBread for nothing. Well, actually, nobody calls me that, but listen, if I do this, y'all are gonna start.
Even after I beat the game, I decided to spare myself from what the other characters sound like, as I don't hate myself enough to replay it 6 times. So where do the problems start? Well, the enemy AI is laughable. The sole program behavior is simply to approach and attack the player no matter what. This winds up making the enemies feel even more dated than its 20-year-old predecessors. Plus, the biodiversity has severely gone down, with just a handful of enemies from the original's Rogues Gallery. Everything just slowly ambles towards you. The original weapons are all present, but feel floaty and lack any kind of oomph. It's way too easy to plow through the entire game with just the repeating Zorcher while the Flemoids death march towards you. Also, the sound mixing is a joke. Any sound effect derived from the original game is either played way too loudly or at a vixen's whisper. To give credit, the remastered music is quite enjoyable, but it's also impossible to hear. Shane's voice cuts through the sound mixing like a grotesque yokel-shaped waveform.
He wasn't really my friend. Man, he was. Yippee-ki-yay, they done made me stronger. Phew, that's enough crates to get a wagon train to Oregon.
The jumble of poor sound design is actually pretty hysterical at times, with dozens of sounds scrambling over each other like crabs in a bucket.
I'm doggone left to say this to you, partner. This cavern ain't big.
Terminals are a new addition to the game, like it's fucking System Shock or something, which either contain really lame jokes or serial references or frenzied alliterations. All 5 levels have been reimagined, and there are moments that certainly approach being enjoyable, but the whole game feels like a slow chore. Shane does not help with this. As a testament to the Aaron-like pace of the gameplay, check out these achievement stats. I acknowledge that there's a fair amount of people that don't have Steve achievements on, and the rarity percentage can be a bit misleading, but I felt compelled to mention that only 2% of people have finished the single-player campaign once. 7% have bothered to just open a door, something that, is necessary to play the fucking game, and only 10% of players have killed a single enemy. Plainly, the game is not fun. After the nostalgia wears off, which takes about 2 seconds, we're left with a bland reimagining of the original trilogy. It begs the question, why not just use Jeezy Doom and create a true homage to the originals? Especially if you're gonna release it for free. Likely because that takes effort, something which General Mills clearly decided against versus a cheap nostalgia grab. I should also mention that on launch, not all characters were available. They decided to instead coin a cheap facsimile of the original marketing gimmick and attach codes to various flavors of Chex Mix to unlock the characters. Considering only 7% of people that bothered to download the game made it into the first door, I'm going to assume this didn't boost sales of Chex Mix by 295%. To sum it up, Chex Quest HD is a giant missed opportunity whose sole contribution is highlighting the original trilogy and making them available to download officially from the Chex website. Now, here's a bunch of weird Shane shit.
Come a long way since covered wagons, huh? Time to hit the old dusty trail. Phew, that's enough crates to get a wagon train to Oregon. Where are you scurrying off to? A secret hot diggity dog, like a cactus through a covered wagon. Level 4. Haven't heard that name in years.
Please help us. We're stuck.
Whoo-wee, you are slimier than a greased up armadillo.
montage didn't already convince you, the original Chex Quest trilogy is simply a delight to play, even today. Its bowl is filled to the brim with charm, passion, and fun. Each successive entry is better than the predecessor, boasting more detailed environments and varied enemies each time. The most impressive chapter is Episode 3, which was designed to take advantage of what are called limit-removing source ports of the Doom engine, essentially meaning that it was able to surpass the restraints that Vanilla Doom put on the first 2 episodes. Given that, I would probably rank them in release order. Each individual episode still has merit. I invite you to grab a spoon, some milk, and get ready for a fiber-fortified foray into the best games about cereal ever made. Okay, I had to get that one out of my system. The charming early 3D just gets me every time. Chex Quest, the first one, starts out with a cutscene explaining the origin of the Flemoids and their destructive love of all things nutritious. The Galactic Order of Cereals has lost contact with the nutritional research base on Bezoik and needs a hero to zorch the Flemoids back to their own dimension. In a stark contrast from the HD remake, this scene actually has more movement, albeit choppy and inhuman. You are forced to play as an unnamed hero from Chex Squadron. They are the only heroic cereal with the, squares? To take on the Flemoids. You land on Bezoik and the game begins. Chex Quest, the one that started it all, is pretty fun. Admittedly, it's also quite simple, with only 5 levels. That's why I decided to play on Super Slimy. Super Slimy is analogous to Doom's Nightmare skill, faster monsters and respawning enemies. I went down to Extreme Ooze for episodes 2 and 3 because they are far more difficult in comparison to the original episode. Plus, I wanted a lovely breeze instead of an arduous time. Despite Chex Quest's simplicity, it is dripping with the aforementioned childlike creativity and charm. Consider that the price of Chex Quest was merely buying an object whose function in the human body is needed to sustain life anyway. I can beat it in about 20 minutes, and that's because I know these levels extremely well. However, I'd wager that a cognitively functional adult new to Doom and its clones would probably take about 40 minutes or so. It's free, it's online, and it's absolutely time well spent. A year later, in 1997, Digital Cafe blessed the unshredded wheat masses with Chex Quest Episode 2, Terror in Chex City. The changes aren't too numerous. Some new art, some new music, and a new set of bosses basically encompasses the broad strokes. However, in my opinion, the levels themselves are vastly improved in quality. We have larger environments with more details and more Flemoids. Both contemporary and present reviews mention that Chex Quest 2 was rushed. They also suggest that it is of lower quality because it reuses old assets frequently. Personally, I don't get this. Episode 2 has 2 of my favorite levels in the series that directly oppose this: the cinema and Chex Museum. Are you capable of telling Chex Jim Carrey that his level sucks while gazing into his eyes? How about Minnesota Jones? How about when there's a reference to Sergei Eisenstein, acclaimed Soviet filmmaker and father of the montage? Chex Museum is also chock full of soul. How does this sound for there being no new assets? There's Chex Elisa, Chex Rothko, Chex Van Gogh, Chex Edvard Munch, The Persistence of Chex, Chex David, Chex the Thinker, Chexosaurus, Chex Botticelli, Chex Queen, Chex Pharaoh, and Chex Hedge Maze. Nevertheless, Episode 2's runtime is about the same as the first, with 5 levels that roughly equate to about 20-ish minutes of game time. There's even a boss in a sewer that killed me repeatedly. Much like the first, it's online, it's free, go get it and have some fun. Episode 3 is clearly the Empire Strikes Back of the Chex Quest original trilogy. Episode 3 raises the stakes across the board and feels like a true sequel to the first game, bigger, badder, and more realized in scope. You are thrust into a plethora of varied environments such as subways, spaceports, cities, forests, cabins, and even mutant organic spaceships. The enemy count and difficulty are both increased overall, with most levels sporting over 100 snotty baddies. There are 2 mini-boss segments, and even a true final boss that isn't just a face on a wall. It's jam-packed with new art and really takes advantage of its updated engine. The soundtrack is also outrageously catchy, and unlike the HD remaster that came out 12 years later, you can actually hear it. With that in mind, I want to dial back my first stupid claim. Chex Quest 3 is actually like the Toy Story 3 of the trilogy, made for an audience that has absolutely grown up since the first one, but wants a bit of return to that comfortable vice grip of nostalgia. It's pretty unfortunate that Chex Quest HD is the next direct chapter to this. On the upside, fan-made mods have kept the original spirit alive and strong over the last 20 years, as is customary with anything good that lasts over a decade. I think it's safe to say that Chex Quest 1, 2, and 3 are good, and Chex Quest HD is bad. However, to go a bit beyond good game good, bad game bad, I'd like to talk about why Chex Quest is endearing enough to still be talked about over 25 years after its inception. I would argue that it goes beyond nostalgia, and Chex Quest's longevity is more of a function of its origin. Most people don't like to be blatantly advertised to, especially if it is through a modality that claims or pretends to not be an advertisement. Chex Quest's strength is that it really is more game than advertisement. When this balance is upset, you wind up with games that are more like advertisements. Shit like Sneaking, Yo Noid, and, of course, Taco Bell's ill-reputed Murder on the Gordita Express. Ads will always be selling something, there's no question about that. However, in the case of Chex Quest, just a dash of humanity went miles towards its lasting appeal. Succinctly, people are still fervently discussing a cereal box prize game from 25 years ago. And I hope after making it to the end of this video, you will too. Till next time. Squares?